Hi, everyone. Welcome to our final panel for the DeFINE project. My name is Roncha. I am with the London College of Fashion, the University of the Arts London, and I was a researcher responsible, one of the researchers responsible for the evaluation report. So today I'll be your host for this particular panel. We will be discussing what's next for fashion tech. Hopefully we'll get some insights from the whole of the DeFINE project, the future of fashion tech, and then after that you will also get a chance to watch the premiere of the DeFINE film. So today I'm joined by an amazing lineup of guest speakers. We've got Rebecca Morter, the founder of Lone Design Club, Muchaneta Kapfunde, editor-in-chief of FashNerd, Arabella Turek, COO of Petit, and Simon Hjelte, business developer of Borås. So I'll hand over to my amazing speakers today to introduce themselves. Rebecca, would you like to go first?
Sure. Thanks so much, Anna. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me. So my name is Rebecca. I'm the founder and CEO of Lone Design Club, and we are a platform that focuses on physical and digital retail. We're a platform for sustainable brands, and essentially what we do is connect them to conscious consumers all over the world. We're about 3 years old a couple of days ago, which is super exciting. And we have a presence in the UK, Italy, and China. A big part or a big kind of focus for us is working with the sustainable brands that we believe will be the future, and helping customers better understand why these brands fit into sustainability. So yeah, that's us.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. Muchaneta, would you like to go next?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Muchaneta Kapfunde. I am the founder of FashNerd.com. I originally came from the fashion industry. I was working in it for about 15 years. I had a passion for technology, but I felt like the industry wasn't really adopting it in a way that they should. So I started FashNerd, and my whole goal was to translate technology in the fashion voice, get the industry excited about the innovations that were taking place. And I've been going for 5 years now, and I absolutely love what I do. It is a bit of a kind of like a hard thing to pull that rock up that hill, because we all know the fashion industry is quite resistant to change. But when I do see the small changes and I do see things happening, then it makes me excited to do my job.
Thank you. I think we all share your passion in here. Arabella, should we go to you next?
Thank you, Anna. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Arabella. I'm CEO at Petit. Petit is a material science company, and we were founded in 2017. Since we released our POC, our proof of concept, in 2017, which went viral, we rapidly evolved our team to include an interdisciplinary army of designers, thinkers, and I guess more importantly, executors, because that is how ideas become reality. We are passionate about solving human problems through applying human-centered design principles. Our first ready-to-market solutions are closed-let growth, which are capable of doing so through a patent-accepted technology, and our designs can be found on petit.com. And I think with respect to me, oh, sorry, my sound is a bit muffled. Definitely not covering my mic. I'm sorry if you can't hear me. I'm gonna try and figure something out. But it's lovely to meet you, and I'll hand over to Simon and Anna.
Simon, I was going to you next. Apologies, ladies first in here in this panel.
No worries, I'm used to that during this project. Hi everyone, my name is Simon. I work as a business developer for innovative startups within the field of fashion or the textile industry as an umbrella, but fashion, retail, and textile tech underneath that umbrella for an incubator in Sweden, in the southwest part of Sweden, called Borås Inc. And I have also been a lead supervisor for 5 startups during the DeFINE program. So all of them with very different profiles. So it's been both interesting and challenging and insightful in both strengths and weaknesses of the community and what needs to happen. And prior to working as a business developer, I have my whole professional background within the lifestyle industry. So I started working in the storage room and ended up running my own startup where micro production on demand was focused. So I'm kind of involved and have an understanding for the entire value chain. And therefore, I know what tech could do to aid the industry of fashion, not the other way around.
Thank you. Thank you so much for all your introductions. I think it's great that we have such a diverse panel as well. So we'll be able to hopefully get quite some good insights into how we can move fashion tech forward. And I think Simon just mentioned the community aspect. And I have to say, from my experience talking to the participants on the DeFINE project, that word definitely came up a lot. So being able to build a community is definitely, or has been, one of the key aspects that they have valued. I wanted to focus a little bit on the skill set, and I think that's something that I think we all have a different take on it. I think by looking at the evaluation report and again referring to the mentors and the participants, the ability to enhance communication between different parties, whether it's connecting technology, fashion companies, or at different stages, different stakeholders. This type of kind of understanding of IP, of business skills, even project management, those are definitely some of the key skill sets that I've seen being referred to the most in terms of the ones that were missing, but also the ones that were most important for leading a project around fashion tech. So I wanted to ask you, perhaps you, Muchaneta, what kind of skill sets do you feel are missing from this sector?
I mean, I feel like, education, I don't know if any of you know, I'm really passionate about it in the last 12 months because I felt like there's been this gap where students are being taught fashion and everything that comes under that umbrella, and they leave with a degree that really doesn't fit the world that we are trying to create right now. They're missing the essential skills that they need in order to offer companies something that they don't already have. So I think it comes down to the schools. We need to look at the schools that are teaching our future designers and think about how can we offer these tutors, these teachers, these skills that they can then pass on to their students. How are we going to do that? I feel like they're trying to change the curriculum, but if you look at fashion design, I just spoke to somebody yesterday who said to me, I went to fashion school 30 years ago, and they're still doing the same course that I did 30 years ago. I mean, what does that tell you? And he works in education. So I was like really shocked. I was like, okay, I knew it was bad, but I didn't know it was that bad. So, I think it starts there. We start with the students. And some of them need to be convinced because I've guest lectured at different universities, and some of the students are not so open to technology. They don't want to lose that artisan, kind of like feel of being a designer. So it's also trying to convince them as well, and making them realize that they need these skills. They need to know how AR, VR works. They need to know about new materials, because these new materials are going to replace the old ones that we are all trying to kind of get rid of right now because they're not so friendly. They need to learn about different ways to do business and different ways to market their product, because PR and marketing departments in the industry are changing now. I really believe they're going to become research departments, experimental labs within the fashion industry. So if you don't give them those tools, then how do you expect them to adopt technology, let alone use it?
That's really interesting what you've just said, because actually we do see a lot of different education institutions partnering with companies and partnering with not just fashion brands, but actually partnering with technology companies to develop the curriculum and to kind of, to definitely give that skill set a bit more. But I agree on the fashion design sector that we're still teaching the way we were teaching some years ago, and definitely even in terms of business business and management curriculum, there should be a lot more focus on what you've just mentioned, all the issues around emerging technologies, disruptive technologies, innovation, because definitely that is a key word for business nowadays, at least business connected to fashion. Do you feel that as well, Rebecca? Do you feel like there's a gap in terms of the skill set that these professionals have?
Yeah, I mean, I think what Muchaneta said is 100% exactly especially what we're seeing. We work with a lot of, the core brands we work with are kind of 2 to kind of 6 years in, but we get a lot of very early stage students that have recently graduated that are looking at starting a business. There's obviously a huge move to entrepreneurship right now, and it's only going to increase. And one of the biggest challenges that we've seen is exactly what Muchaneta has outlined, especially on the business side, where students are still being taught, or there's still this idea that you have to create a physical product and that you have to go through the traditional sense of getting a brand to market. The business acumen, the skill set needed on the business side is not taught enough. It's not built in. And I couldn't agree. It's the same as when I studied, and I definitely didn't get any, there definitely was a lack of business, support along that side. It was very much that creative artisanal approach. And I think from the technology side, again, it's so much still built into the education that you have to make a viable product. It has to be an actual physical product. It has to be sewn and created. And I think what Muchaneta was saying about VR and AR is now the possibilities are endless, and we need to start thinking much more, further outside the box than what we once did when it comes to fashion. And I think even in terms of sustainability, which is a hugely important subject right now, it's still very much that approach of sustainable materials or considering ethics. And I just think the technology and innovation on the side of sustainability especially should just be so much deeper integrated.
And do you think that is something that can come with do you think they need that skill set, for example, on a design course, or do you feel that's something that can come from collaboration? The same as community that Simon mentioned, but I think collaboration and partnerships have been two essential words throughout this project, and definitely throughout all the different teams. Do you feel that skill set, that kind of complementary skills, could come from collaboration and partnerships, or do you feel that the founders themselves should actually have those that kind of knowledge?
100%. I think collaboration is fantastic, and it is the way forward. I think there is sometimes challenges or challenges between both, and being able to bring the two together harmoniously can be a challenge. I think there still needs to be that step beforehand, where it is in university or it is in education, to be able to show people why it's important to go down these routes. And I think that's the step that's often missing. But no, I think collaboration is absolutely key. But there is more work to be done at earlier stage in education to properly prepare and to show why collaboration can be so successful, and how bringing various skill sets together, it can be so much more powerful.
Arabella, do you feel that? Do you feel that as well? How did, in your particular example, do you feel that collaboration and partnership was crucial to develop your offer?
So I think, with respect to skill sets, which I think nurturing and also maybe self-cultivating is really umbrellas all the conversations that we've had. And I think in our case, on account of being within the nascent market, but also being a new innovation, the skills we required didn't exist within fashion per its consumer-facing definition today. I think how we're defining the word fashion is really interesting compared to the present day, the past, and what it means in the future. And I think with respect to Muchaneta's points, and also Rebecca's points about students being equipped with the skill set, I think partnerships are definitely one way to, I guess, embedding those skills within the traditional fashion sector, which is so craft oriented, just because on the basis of its history and how it's scaled. But I think moreover, the core base to entrepreneurship is critical thinking and confidence. And that comes not from a confidence in your perspective and your point of view and your design ethos, but a confidence and ability to rise against all the ebbs and flows. Simon, who was our mentor, who for us in the DeFINE program, saw how we navigated COVID. And that type of gumption, maybe Rebecca as a founder of a company who's also navigated COVID, that type of gumption, I think, can definitely be embedded, but I don't think it can be bound by a particular curriculum. I think critical thinking outside of a subject space is more important, and how fashion is defined, much like how medicine has, I guess, if we look at it to compare against as far as skill sets are concerned, doctors were butchers at the beginning of the 20th century, and now they're more mathematicians. However, medicine, the term has remained the same. So who are the people that practice fashion? And I think Muchaneta's point of marketing being a researcher comment really really speaks to this idea of an evolving industry.
Right.
And I think the practitioners are the ones that need to identify whether they want to be a craftsman or a scientist, maybe.
That's a really interesting. I guess it's all down to the evolution, isn't it? So obviously we're all sitting here and talking about fashion tech because of how the industry has evolved. And Rebecca mentioned sustainability, and I think to your last point, Rebecca, it all has to do with how we define fashion and how this evolution has been. Simon, in your presentation, you did say that obviously you were a mentor, you work closely with the teams. You've been very aware of all the challenges, the difficulties, and also the advantages of this type of project. Do you feel that there's particular actionable recommendations that we can take forward to hopefully bridge this gap and to hopefully make the FashTech ecosystem more sustainable in the future?
I mean, first of all, I would like to say that everyone made very relevant points on what's maybe not working and what needs to be redefined, especially what Arabella said about redefining what fashion actually means. I mean, if you go to the core of it, it's on one hand, it has to do with clothes to cover you from temperature or weather or whatever, but mainly it's about social positioning, right? So that's what we're offering people if we're in the fashion aspect. But I mean, concrete advice would be you also touched upon it, Anna, when you talked about management and leadership, because the organizational structure of a startup coming into the fashion industry needs to have a different set of skills. And I think I put a lot of emphasis during the evaluation report on talking about this, that there needs to be an understanding between the two as well, because from the tech aspect, you're used to running in a very fast-paced, stand-up-based progression where you can iterate everything all the time. And if you come from fashion, you are more used to developing what will essentially be a finished product, no matter what the consumer thinks about it, after a 12-month process. And that's, as Muchaneta said, still what people are being taught. That this is what you're going to be putting on the market, develop samples, physical ones, and then present them cohesively so that people understand your offer. That needs to be turned around. The fashion natives, I would say, which I find quite interesting, because everyone in the fashion industry is really used to innovation. They iterate their offering at least 4 times a year. I mean, 2 collections per season. But they're not used to innovation together with or at pace with the market. So that needs to change. So
I think that's definitely a very interesting point we've just said about the pace, because obviously, the traditional fashion pace works at, as you said, Simon, at a very different pace from technology companies. So when you want to develop something which touches on both sectors, how do you do that? How are you able to move that forward?
I think Rebecca was talking about it when she introduced herself, digital and physical. I mean, there are things that tech can do to aid fashion in improving the offer before you put it on the market. Because I think that I don't think that the fashion companies to the necessary extent rely on the customers to judge whether they're interested or not based on the digital copies of what they're looking at. I think the customer is already mature. So I think the companies need to learn to interact with the market in a whole new way. But I think also it's interesting because it's an industry problem. And I think we see this whenever there's a paradigm shift. I mean, when Spotify came, there was no record labels that were interested in approaching that business model. It's the same in fashion, because you don't really have suppliers that can support a more fast-paced structure. So we need to solve that problem as well.
How do you think that could be solved then? Is that through the partnerships and collaborations and finding, I guess, like-minded people?
I think so, absolutely. I mean, if you look in every other industry, but maybe especially like pure technology companies and mobility, you have a huge presence from the companies of the industry that want to do corporate innovation. So they essentially ask the startups coming from the next paradigm, but they're already there, to tell them what to do, basically. We have a couple of challenges. Can you help us rework the machinery, rework the offering? So that needs to be more present. I mean, at the moment, we basically see Farfetch are doing really good things in terms of innovation together with startups, but also H&M are doing it in 3 different programs. But that needs to be bigger and everywhere, basically.
It's interesting what you've mentioned about the presence of companies, because, Farfetch and H&M, and one of the findings that came from this report was also about that, like how can we further integrate companies and bigger brands into this, exactly to create that ecosystem that you've just mentioned, Simon, exactly to leverage this connection and to streamline as well the different processes. And I think it's beneficial for both parties. Rebecca mentioned sustainability in the beginning. I was just wondering, what kind of other opportunities do you know of that could be kind of in line with the fashion tech sector, apart from sustainability? Would you like to expand on that?
Yeah, of course. It's in terms of opportunities we're seeing now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Future opportunities, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's tricky. When the kind of, I feel like we've been doing a lot of reflection about kind of digital and innovation and tech in the past few weeks. And one of the big things that's come to the surface is that, when the pandemic, when it started, it felt, everyone went digital. And it felt like, this was a hugely growing sector. It was going to suddenly take off. And I think really what it did, and I think even Muchaneta, it was one panel we did together a while ago that you mentioned. I think I asked the question, who do you think's winning? Who do you think's doing really well in digital? Because there was a bit of an assumption that because we all went digital, there was a huge acceleration in growth and people were super winning at it. And I think your response was, I can't think of anyone. I think a big thing, or there was a lot of learning, or there has been in the past few weeks, in conversation I've had anyway, that digital really kicked off only last year. And I think a lot of companies had a huge amount of work to do in the foundations and the back end and just getting that right and starting to understand what customers actually wanted from that digital and that tech experience. And I think what we've really seen from the customer as well is this huge learning and adoption, only just beginning to use tech. And if we look to China or what's happened, they're years ahead, obviously, but the adoption that now you'll go to China and you've got, 18-year-olds and you've got 60-year-olds using WeChat and technology. This is just beginning or just kicking off here. And I think it's really interesting to see the kind of parallels between the two. But the past few weeks anyway, I really think that digital is very early still. I think we have a long, long way to go. And it's hard to see the kind of winners or where it's going to go. But what we're focusing on anyway is what is the customer going to respond to? At LDC, physical has always been, or that was where we started. That was what we knew we were good at. We were, it was going really, really well. COVID hit, and obviously we had to go fully digital, just like everyone. And I think what we've really seen is a much slower growth or adoption to the technology of what does a customer actually want, what's actually going to be helpful, not gimmicky, but actually helpful for them to shop online. And the technologies that we're seeing anyway, it's live stream shopping is obviously becoming hugely important. It's not a converter yet, I would say, like it is in China, but it's definitely growing and it's going in that direction. Personalized video appointments or live stream shopping personally is becoming a big thing that we're seeing as well. And then I think the other two categories that are huge that we're interested in, that we're still waiting to find or see any kind of proper, anyone probably winning at it, is when it comes down to logistics, speed, returns, that process. But then also fit and sizing, which is a huge issue. It's still something like 1 in 3 items will be returned, which is massive. And we would never get that in physical. Yeah. We would have less than 1% return rate. Whereas now, it's, I think there's a huge amount of scope, but I really believe that technology and digital, it hasn't even really started yet in the fashion industry. It's just the beginning.
And I guess for what you just mentioned, Rebecca, digital plays such a big role because, AR can definitely help with the fit. Yeah. With the virtual fitting room, for example. And then when it comes to the last mile as well, all those aspects around like deliveries and returns can definitely be streamlined with digital tools. Just going to you, Muchaneta, would you like to add some further kind of exciting opportunities that you are aware of that we should be mindful of for the future?
I mean, I think one thing that the pandemic, which I'm sure we all agree, has really accelerated technology, and people are really kind of going a little crazy about being digital. Oh my God, I've got to make sure that I'm keeping up with the Joneses. But besides brands going digital, I do feel like it's also shone a light on the brick and mortar stores. It's shone a light on how technology can help brick and mortar fashion retailers transition. It's about time that they change how they sell, and that they look to technology to do that, because it's no longer enough to sell things. Now is the time. I feel like a lot of fashion brands are realizing that they need to rethink physical retail and the purpose of brick and mortar stores, and the importance of evolving. So, I kind of hope that a lot of fashion brands and retailers don't get lost too much on the digital side of it, but also kind of look at, take this moment to look at their physical stores and kind of figure out how they can adapt to the digital disruption and kind of help, attract the new consumer. Because in the end, the physical store, in my opinion, still remains quite important within the fashion industry. All we need to change the idea of what it means, what a physical store means, and kind of evolve in that way. And by doing so, I feel like they will appeal to a lot more customers as well. And I really truly believe that when I shop online, it's convenience. But when I go into a store, I want experience. Totally different. So I feel like this pandemic has opened the eyes of many high street retailers to realize that they need to up their game. They need to look at innovation and how they can actually improve the experience that we have when we walk into a physical store. And I really believe that the ones that do not look into it are going to join the brands that I shall not name in the great retailers that have gone through this piece. So I kind of feel like this is now the time for them to open their eyes. It's not about us going back to normal once COVID is under control. It's more about how can I create a store that tells my story, that gives the consumer that intense sensory experience that they receive online, or cannot receive online, shall I say. And how can we trigger that emotional connection with our consumer, so when they walk into the store, they feel like they're walking into a space that basically tells the story of the brand. And there's so much technology available right now that will help retailers do this. Yes, it's not quite there yet. Some of the innovation is still finding its way, but look at what it can do for you. Look at what it can do for you in the future, because it will take time for retailers to adopt this technology. So why not experiment, learn, and not be afraid to fail? Because if it doesn't work for you, try something else.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it comes down to, I think all of us have mentioned the consumer word in this panel for the last half an hour, but it comes down to the consumer, doesn't it? It comes down to what experience do they want out of that physical store? And we've been discussing the death of the physical store for years now. And there's this great quote from one of the founders of Warby Parker that says, the physical store isn't dead, but mediocre experiences in retail are. And I think it comes down to that. It's about making sure that we build those experiences, that we build the element of storytelling into the store without reaching that gimmicky effect, without using technology just for the sake of technology, which obviously is not what the consumer intends to take out of that experience. So thank you so much for that kind of forecasting into the different opportunities.
Just to add to what you just said, Anna, the consumer they're quite bright. We can't fool them with the gimmicky stuff anymore. And I think the industry is learning that. They were very gimmicky with the technology, and that took away the value of their innovation when they use it as a gimmick. Because then people then view it as such, rather than view it as the potential of what it can bring to the table.
And it backlashes against the actual brand as well. Yes, Simon.
I just wanted to add to what Muchaneta said, because there are different aspects here. There are upstream and downstream perspectives. And what I would say is that the corona or the COVID pandemic has, I think, created a perfect storm for retail. If we're focusing on upstream, it's not about companies that are offering products retail. It's also about the real estate owners that have been using a business model which is, it's prehistoric. And I think that the brands have been pushing for we want to do pop-ups. We can pay more for less time per square meter, and we want to be everywhere but not all the time at the same time and stuff like that. And what we're seeing in Sweden, which is happening, I think, probably all over the world, but in Sweden, all of the bigger real estate companies are now reevaluating their business models to be more in line with the digital companies of retail and fashion. So I think this is the time to do it. I mean, it can't be stopped, and the perfect storm from the pandemic will make it happen.
Yeah, no, you're definitely right. I think we see that in the UK as well, with some of those, like, with the rents being more flexible. There's a bigger surge for smaller spaces, because obviously you don't need all that big space. Like, we used to have like mega stores that you don't necessarily need nowadays because of the digital integration. So definitely that's one of the key trends. I'd like to just bring us all back to the DeFINE project and to the actual kind of community side of it. So I was going to go to Arabella in terms of exploring a little bit of the connections that you made during the project. How important was that? I guess we're still on like this kind of community and collaboration, but how important were the connections that you made during the project, and how do you kind of foresee in terms of how can you ensure the longevity of those connections?
So for us, with respect to the connections created as a mentee, we had a whole range of mentors. Our principal mentor was Simon at Borås, and as a London-based company, with a mentor base over another ocean, within a university which was quite, I guess, implanted within Swedish history, within the craft side of fashion that has evolved into a really innovative space within Sweden, not only just from the scientific front, but from a sustainability perspective, was hugely exciting. And through our connection with Simon, we were able to meet with incredible experts such as Matt, who was part of the team who made the airbag for Volvo, which is not maybe a connection you would think of as something that would be interesting to someone within fashion, but for us it was hugely important on account of their knowledge of materials. But I think, as I mentioned earlier, what with COVID, that type of honest feedback and also space to rely upon someone within a larger network than our startup could actually foster within London was hugely important. And for that reason, I think we were so grateful during that time period. Even though, Simon, we haven't spoken so much since our mentorship, maybe just a few emails here and there, we asked to invite Simon to advise for us on a long-term basis with the company, just because we were so grateful for that opportunity. And maybe, hopefully, Simon will say maybe he enjoyed the experience, maybe he didn't. But either way, we were grateful for the opportunity. And I think on account of the discussions prior to this question, focusing so much on consumption, and I think because consumption is such and procurement of objects is an essential life activity, and how that activity is moving to different spheres. If we just look at food and Amazon, that type of connection with someone like Simon, as well connected as he is, as the world changes, is an important anchor for all startups to have.
Would you like to add to that, Simon? How do you think we can ensure this kind of longevity of connections that were started with DeFINE?
I mean, that's certainly one thing that needs to be actively worked on or worked with, because we all have different specialities. I mean, you don't have the same kind of industry in Portugal as you do in Borås in Sweden, because it's developed over time due to whatever industry was there from the beginning due to whatever reasons. But my experience during the mentoring was that COVID hit quite quickly in the beginning of the mentoring program. So one of the more important aspects, I think, was the access that the companies would be given to the laboratories of these innovative different landscapes around Europe. And I think that physical meeting, or if it's at Fashion Innovation Agency in London, the digital equivalence to what Borås is for industry and production, is super important. And in order for it to happen, there needs to be some kind of moderated community that someone actually makes sure exists. Because if we just have a domain on the internet where you say that you can go and find like-minded, it's never going to happen. It needs to be moderated by someone actively. And one thing that I'm longing for as well is to have an aspiring network that intersects fashion and technology, because that's not happening at the moment. If you're a fashion company, you need to go find someone in the tech community, and they're really averse to your approach. They're like, we're in tech, you're in fashion, it's different things. And the same for tech. I mean, if they're looking for turnover in innovative startups, there's one or two industries bigger worldwide. So they also need to migrate and understand how that business works. But it needs to be moderated in order for it to stay alive.
Yes.
Or to grow.
I do definitely agree with the moderation aspect, because so we had a survey going out to round 1 and round 2 participants. And one of the questions was about how much they've engaged with the online community. And we realized that actually, it's the key kind of learnings from that is that they went through the website. Yes, they were aware of the website, but then after that, there was not a lot of engagement with the other tools, such as, the LinkedIn, for all of those different tools they were provided with. But then on the other hand, they were kind of hoping for a much more kind of casual conversation, whether it's a WhatsApp group or, something like that. That, if they're looking for someone, they could just drop a quick message. So that definitely needs to be moderated in order to be kind of sustained, but also in order to gain a bit of traction as well. Because as you say, technology companies won't necessarily look at fashion as their number one industry to target, and vice versa. So it is important to kind of prompt those the partnership, whether matchmaking or something like that. But definitely that's one of the key factors. Before we move on to questions from the audience, I just wanted to kind of pose one last question to all of you. If you kind of in 10 years' time, when you look back over the growth of this fashion tech sector, what would you hope to see? What would be the ideal scenario? Rebecca, should I start with you first?
Gosh, okay. In the hot seat.
I guess 10 years is probably a lot under the current scenario, but let's
yes. It's a long time, but I mean, it's going to be fascinating when we do get there and look back. I mean, what I don't know, like I kind of said earlier, I really believe digital is at the beginning when it comes to really helping, really doing what customers want and need from it. I think we're very much in the early stages. But I'm excited. I mean, the growth, the acceleration of where it's heading, the companies emerging, the technology, the way customers are adapting, using technology and informing where there's opportunity, I think is absolutely fascinating. And I think there's so much scope and opportunity. In 10 years' time, I'd love, I think we will see this, just a much more harmonized relationship between physical and digital technology that actually is 100% useful by the customer. We really run LDC thinking the customer is king. We put them at the forefront of everything we do. And I think you just have to in this day and age. It's all about individualism, and people make their own decisions. They're not following or abiding by trends necessarily as they used to. And I think because of that, really looking at how we can aid our customers, whether it's a shopping journey or a discovery kind of journey. But I think for me, it's really seeing that harmonize physical and digital, and looking at and seeing digital that really aids and supports customers globally. How a local physical store can become a global destination for consumers, I think is fascinating and super possible when we look at live streaming and opportunities. How can something hyper-local actually be broadcast globally and become a global powerhouse for that space? I think there's so much between digital and physical in the retail sector. Obviously, that's where I'm kind of interested in, but I'm excited to see.
How about you, Muchaneta? What would be your kind of ideal scenario in 10 years' time?
Okay, I'm going to be greedy and I'm going to make 2 points.
Go ahead.
Because there's so much, and I just feel like I'll bring it down to 2. The first one that I hope to kind of see forward in terms of the next 10 years is technology helping businesses kind of lessen the need for fast fashion's instant gratification mentality, but offering consumers something else. So by this, I'm talking about helping brands use innovation to shift the way they kind of sell their product and how they appeal to brands. So, because I do feel like fast fashion, everyone's like, we need to stop it, but it's been around so long that it will take a while for the industry to find a way of, of us not needing the Primarks and kind of like that kind of H&M kind of style of selling, so I kind of think technology will play a key role in that. And I really hope that fast fashion will become nothing but a distant memory in the coming 10 years. And my second one is that, fingers crossed, I love to see the growth of like repair labs and research departments within fashion brands. And this might sound a bit far-fetched, but I do think it's possible. And I come from fashion PR. I mean, I did PR for 10 years for fashion brands. But I do think PR and marketing needs to take a kind of like a backseat a little bit and channel that money into creating repair labs and research departments within the company. Recently, I heard about Tommy Hilfiger. They came up with a repair lab now. So basically, they kind of encourage customers to kind of bring their products and they'll repair them, and they'll also use any waste that they've created to create a new collection. It's not to the level of what they sell now, but it's kind of them trying to use waste and to come up with a collection that they can still sell to consumers. And the idea of labs, I mean, if we look at the sports industry and industries like that, they are always investing in the next thing or how to make things better, more sustainable, more appealing to the customer. But the fashion industry doesn't do that. So I would like to see in the next 10 years, dear fashion industry, is you investing in your future through labs and so forth.
Okay, thank you. How about you, Arabella? What would you like to see in 10 years' time?
So I think my sentiment really mirrors Muchaneta's sentiment with respect to fast fashion. And I think that 10 years maybe is too short a lead time on account of the 20th century focusing on creating a global manufacturing behemoth, which the 20th century focused on a few luxury companies that own the market and for the most part really own these supply chains, and also the consumer for the moment, so that within 10 years, I don't think too much can change. However, if fast fashion democratized clothing in the 20th century, I believe technology and innovation can definitely breed a culture and demand for transparency and sustainability. And I think, much like Muchaneta said, there's been such just on account of the prevalence of fast fashion and how it changed the meaning of desire for the mass consumer. There's definitely been in the past maybe an over interest in marketing and PR. So I think I really am excited to see how the verb and noun shop evolve. So shop as in shopfront, which we've discussed before, and the verb to shop. How are we going to continually evolve that essential life activity?
Thank you.
And I think fashion and tech. Yeah.
Simon, would you have some further comments on that before we move on to the
I think
questions?
Most of it has been said. I just wanted to start off with don't overestimate what you can do in a short time span, but don't underestimate what you can do in 10 years time. I mean, Facebook is 13 years old, and it's a part of everyone's everyday life from when we wake up and when we go to sleep. So, but what I would like to see is the evaluation in terms of what does fast fashion mean in 10 years time. I mean that fast fashion will be based on demand production based on data and customer knowledge, thanks to an industry, I mean upstream, of manufacturers that have finally designed to align with the times. So it won't be based on mass quantity. It will be based on on-demand processes that are in 10 years time very, very, very feasible if the industry align.
Thank you. So more on the make to order, kind of a shift in business models, I guess, for the traditional fashion sector. Yeah. So we're going to go on to some questions from the audience. We've got one in here I might go to you, Simon, for this one, actually. So Jay Anderson is asking, in terms of when we were talking about education and this kind of different partners with professionals and students to drive business education and support the skills growth in the fashion industry, are you aware of any similar initiatives in the UK or in the EU as a whole?
I mean, in Sweden, I'm aware of initiatives, but it never evolves to become what already exists in New York. But then I would say, like, my understanding of LCF and Fashion Innovation Agency is that you're coming close. But in Sweden, we're falling short. It's still very, very traditional.
Yeah,
both
I guess
when it comes to you can comment on the LCF.
Yes, I guess I could. I'm a bit biased on here, but I can comment on the LCF, and we definitely have a bit of a wider approach when it comes to that because of the different schools that we have. The Fashion Business School, the School of Media and Technology, the School of Communication, and definitely the design and technology, obviously. And then we have these kind of satellite companies such as, the Fashion Innovation Agency or the Center for Sustainable Fashion. And we do try to bring that into the learning, the curriculum as much as possible. So we do try to develop a variety of different partnerships with those with FIA and the Center for Sustainable Fashion that helps the students to be more aware of that, as Muchaneta and Rebecca were saying in the beginning, at least to kind of question. I can say from the perspective of the business school, I'm not so sure in terms of their involvement with the design courses, but definitely from the business courses, we do try to make that a bit tighter to make sure that the students have a wider awareness of things such as AR and AI as well. But I think a lot more could definitely be done on that level for sure.
Just to add to that,
yes.
We were part of the CFE, which is obviously a phenomenal program that was put on by UAL, and we were part of the FashTech Accelerate program. And I think what was really cool specifically about that program, it opened it up, business upskilling to those outside of UAL who started at different universities, be it Imperial or RCA, and I think that's an incredibly exciting process.
Yeah, so we do try. Go ahead, Rebecca.
Yeah, I was going to say the same. Yeah, so we did. So CFE are fantastic. We've done quite a couple of their programs as well, and they are amazing. And I think also, just going back to your point on LCF, I do think one of the best things that, and I'm sure it's still the same when I was there. This was obviously years ago, but a lot of the industry live projects that are brought in for the students are fantastic. Those, I think, are one of they really support and help students have that. It's no longer just theory, but it's in practice projects, whether it's competitions or whatever, but 3-month periods actually working with a business, which was great. I think, just more of them and more brought into the curriculum. But I think what LCF's doing internally with students on that respect, project-based, is fantastic. And yeah, CFE, and there are so many others. Which are great. There's lots of little other resources as well.
Oh, also LDC, you guys are great. you guys run all these events to help with that too, because you've seen the need for that.
And there's also, I think it's called the Digital Fashion Group, it's just launched. And they are also all about trying to educate the professionals and the students, maybe the graduates who might have graduated and feel like they are missing certain skill sets that makes their CV stand apart from the rest, can do certain courses that they're offering to kind of up their game, I guess you could say. And also, and then I think they also go into companies to educate the people working in the company about what's going on in terms of innovation.
Yeah, I think they just launched something very recently, didn't they? Like over the last couple of days. Yeah, so that's an interesting initiative as well of bringing these kind of, hopefully, kind of bringing these skills to graduates and to students.
Yeah, actually, that is. Thank you, Arabella, for mentioning. I completely forgot. I was going on a totally different tangent, but we do. So we do actually do a lot of webinars. We bring in experts. From different sectors, and we do 2 a month. Again, trying to bridge that gap of these incredibly creative, talented young entrepreneurs. How can we create access to people of very deep expertise and skill set, whether it's on, specifically on PR and marketing, it's on how to tell your sustainability story, identifying sustainability in your business or where you want to put your focus, SEO, maximizing anything basically, or we get a lot of feedback from our community on where they're struggling. or where they want more support or knowledge or connections to people. And we do a program on that, and I know there are a lot out there as well, but that can be a really great resource.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
I think outside of this, because we've been quite fortunate, you sometimes have to go outside of the traditional norms. So, for example, I think Simon mentioned earlier how H&M are doing lots of great opportunities for startups, and we were one of those lucky startups who won the H&M Global Change Award, and with that, there's an accelerator program which links with business professionals within the service industry within Europe. So there's a whole plethora of opportunity put up by businesses, small and large, like Rebecca's, LBC's, and H&M.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's quite a few initiatives, kind of going. I think there's not yet that perhaps a little bit of what the US has in terms of this kind of culture for VCs and for investing in smaller. So there might be a bit. Obviously, there's a bit more development on that area in there, but I think we are, and I think in Europe we're definitely, there's a few brands, institutions, whether from academia or like independent ones, that are definitely venturing into this, kind of filling the gaps of this skill sets and what is needed. So I've got a question for you, Muchaneta, in here. How are you aware of any other fashion or fashiontech startups that are quite exciting at the moment, apart from them, from LDC and Petit, obviously, that are in the panel?
I mean,
any other examples?
There are quite a few, but they're not as many as there used to be. If we rewind back to 2015, when you had Ringley, Wisewear, all these brands that were doing amazing things within the fashion tech space that have disappeared because, either they launched too early and people were not ready for them, or it just was hard to find that funding. I do feel like a lot of investors can't see the long-term goal, but they see more the short-term. So they're like, okay, we'll give you money, but in 12 months, we want this, and it's just not how it works. But there are some that have survived. There's Nadi X. They're like yoga pants that teach you yoga. I mean, they're still going really strong, so you need to check them out as well. There's Lumia. That's a New York-based startup. They're doing amazing work. I love what Maddie does. I've always been a massive fan of hers. There's quite a few. I mean, on FashNerd, we write a lot about fashion tech startups, but unfortunately, they do come and go. So, but what I always feel like, if the ones that do fail pave the way for the ones that are coming, because they show you what they did wrong or how it went wrong, and therefore they're kind of like the Google Glass of fashion tech. You learn from it and you do better. But I am hoping that the industry will continue to support the up-and-coming startups so we can kind of continue to keep them going, and not lose them in the battlefield.
Timing. You've mentioned timing, and that is crucial, isn't it? Because some of them actually come earlier and the consumer is not ready for that or is not ready to adopt that. But then, a couple of years later, and they will be. So definitely, the ability to stay and to be persistent, which isn't easy, obviously, if you're dealing with startups and less funding, etc. So it can be a bit tricky. But timing, I feel, is crucial as well.
Timing is super important, because I know some people that bought Ringley, which is a really fantastic fashion tech startup that had so much press, even in the consumer press. But the problem with it is that people that bought it, and when it folded, their product became obsolete. So there was a lot of complaints of I really believed in fashion tech, and now I got this product and it doesn't work anymore because there's no updates for it. So I feel like it kind of was a bit of a stumbling block for people that, the early adopters that were really trying to support that space. But I kind of hope that going forward that we are able to kind of put money into it and support and have the industry work as one, which is the big problem with the fashion industry. We kind of work in our own little cocoons and don't really, share our knowledge. I kind of look forward to the industry kind of supporting the startups, thinking like a startup, not being afraid to fail, and really kind of pushing forward these amazing ideas that are coming from these people,
Simon, would you like to add to that? Any kind of good examples that we should be looking at?
Well, I think, go to Global Change Award and read the list of companies that have applied, and you'll find a few interesting ones. But also, I think I'm hugely interested in what Unspun is doing in terms of fit. That would be even more interesting if some of the companies that I can't really mention because I work with them in my incubation process. We're seeing a lot of more really early stage startups that are actually focused on the manufacturing aspect, increasing the level of automation where it's possible, meaning changing fast fashion forever. And if Unspun can deliver for another 5 years, then they will explode, I think, depending on how they scale. But I mean, one comment on what you said, Muchaneta, I think in every other innovative industry, which every industry has to be, you're proud of your fail rates. I mean, if you have a 95% fail rate, that's considered good. Then you have 5% of successes. So what Muchaneta said, all of the ones that do actually try something pave the way for the others. So, yeah, I think that's really important to remember.
A different, I guess it's that kind of test and learn, isn't it? And then make sure that you continue and you're persistent. But that's also a skill, isn't it? I feel, and I think that kind of wrapping up the panel today. And I think we started off by talking about the different skills, skill set needed, redefining, education, redefining fashion, reinventing what all of that is, but also reinventing a bit of, what we understand as success, because what we just mentioned about test and fail is definitely crucial on that note. Just as a final note, I think we gave a few hints here in terms of what would be the future of FashTech, hopefully. So in terms of trends, we mentioned aspects such as sustainability and how technology can be used to help a more sustainable future for the industry. A much more seamless integration of digital and physical. So making sure that we reinvent fashion retail, we reinvent the store of the future, but also we reinvent the digital experience that we have with live streaming, live selling, perhaps with virtual fitting rooms, and above all, this focus on the consumer that I think we need to make sure we sustain, and we have this focus on the consumer and their experience. So above all, it's about making sure that technology is there to help the consumers, and whether that is through, we were talking about the repairs labs, the different kind of programs that companies can put and can be part of in order to be more focused on innovation that actually helps consumers. The shift to on demand, the shift to this made to order, kind of to rethink fast fashion. So I think we gave a few tips in there of what we would all like to see in this fashion tech ecosystem. And then when it comes to the project itself, I guess, again, this will all come later in the evaluation report, but it's pretty much about this kind of aspects around building a community, the need to somehow enhance collaboration and partnerships through matchmaking and a much more closer sense of collaboration and community building, definitely. So I'd like to thank everyone in the panel today. I think it's been great. We had some really interesting points discussed in here. And yeah, so I think it's been a good end to this week of discussion. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of the day. Bye.